Thank you. Senator Roberts.
Thank you. You've told me in the questions on notice, the answer to the questions on notice, you've done the analysis. Now you're telling me that we can only speculate on what those businesses are receiving in terms of subsidies that contribute to your returns. What is it?
Senator, I guess I'm just trying to kind of use some examples to try and flush out what you mean by subsidies. Are the subsidies that are being provided to our borrowers?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so a borrower...
You understand their streams, their money streams. What percentage, what is the proportion of subsidies in there? In other words, the government is paying to help you get a return on your loans.
But it might be, there are in some cases, there are companies we've lent to that are recipients of state government benefits. For some reason, they might...
The point is you're investing in something that needs subsidies to survive. So we've got the government giving money under a loan and then relying upon other subsidies from the same taxpayers, maybe state, maybe federal, to get a return back.
In many cases, just in terms of wind and solar, even if you backed out the subsidy around the generation certificate, they would, in most cases, still be able to pay their debt. So, and you've got to remember that we're also, we don't come up with the subsidies. We are there looking at projects and companies.
I'm not accusing you of coming up with the subsidies.
No.
I'm saying that your borrowers cannot pay it back without those subsidies.
No, I don't think that's right, Senator.
Could you give me the figures that show that, please? Because you said you've got the analysis.
We could give you examples of some renewable... The only ones I think are the borrowers that we have that are receiving material or a part of their direct revenue source or generation may also have some form of government subsidy is probably... wind and solar, because they are recipients of, you get a... But there are other... There are ones that have nothing to do with no government subsidies.
Let's move on to something that's associated, because you don't know the income streams. So I also asked, in Senate estimates on notice, I asked you what the risk to wind and solar investments was from a change in government policy. You didn't answer what the risk was. You just said you have assessed the risk like any prudent investor. So let me quote. I asked, political risk is one of the most basic elements of assessing a business case. What is the risk to wind and solar investments if the government were to abandon their net zero policy, which some jurisdictions around the world are discussing right now? So the answer I got was, the question is a hypothetical, but suffice to say, like any prudent investor, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation undertakes due diligence into risks to any revenue stream and structures its investments to ensure that it is not unduly exposed to risk, including policy risk. So if you've assessed the risk, what is the risk?
What is the risk of a government abandoning? Well, I think
financial risk. What is the risk to your loan?
Hard to speculate. We would look at...
But you've assessed it.
Yeah, because we would have looked at it and we've gone, what sort of generation would this wind or solar farm produce? What do we estimate the power prices over the term of our loan? Might be 5 years, might be 7 years. Introduce some element of risk to those cash flows and then look at whether or not our debt could be paid back. If a future government changed policies around net zero, it would take some while before that potentially would have any impact. I don't think, I think it's not a risk that we would be factoring into it, because we're looking at the more immediate and realistic options.
So you've said you've done your due diligence, but you can't put a handle on the risk. So I'd put it to you that the government abandoning net zero targets would be catastrophic for your investments. Without targets, there are no subsidies, and the generators couldn't produce a return and pay back the loan.
Senator Roberts, I think the problem with the line of questioning you're pursuing with Mr Learmonth is that you assume that investments in the national electricity market are driven by subsidies, which you have not identified. all over the world, renewable energy is increasing because of its technological advantages and because of the cost profile of alternatives.
Hydrocarbons are for three...
May I finish?
Yes.
Particularly where either the overall demand in an electricity system is growing or where assets need to be replaced. I think, Mr Learmonth, you have repeatedly mischaracterised his answers to you and then put the question back to him in a form that misrepresents the position he's just put to you. I think, to be fair to the officer, he is doing a good job at describing to you the processes that the CEFC go through in examining investment opportunities.
Well, combining what you've said...
Senator Roberts, I'm going to have to make this your last question.
Right, I'll move on. I note that in those same answers that you don't screen any investments for connections to political donations. Don't you think that is some basic due diligence? Shouldn't you be bringing it to the attention of the Minister if you are about to give a company hundreds of millions of dollars and it has made a political donation?
We undertake very significant due diligence on all our borrowers or investee companies. We would look at whether there was some overt political connection.
We're actually required to, Senator, under the AML-CTF, the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorist Financing, we're required to identify politically exposed persons, and that is part of due diligence.
Okay. Chair, if I could just respond to Senator McAllister. Senator McAllister, in response to your comments, the world has invested globally trillions of dollars. I think the figure may be 150 from memory, but I may be wrong on that. And the share of energy used on the planet has gone from hydrocarbons has gone from 82% to 81% over the last 10, 20 years, despite trillions of dollars in solar and wind.
Take that one as a comment.
Yes, it's not a question.
Excellent.
It's a fact.
Senator Cadell.